Good morning. Welcome to you all. I would like to thank the Rimini meeting for organizing this meeting dedicated to Qaraqosh, a fragment of the Middle East whose history is particular, and it helps us shed a light on the situation of this very delicate and difficult area. A town which experienced a particular fate which also has to do with us. The topic of today is the reconstruction and the return of Christians to Qaraqosh. Reconstruction and return are two words which are very dense. They contain history, provocation, responsibility, uncertainties, and we will discover them in all their social, cultural, religious, and humanitarian meanings, along with our guests, and I'm going to introduce them. We have Alberto Ortega Martín in Iraq and Apostolic Nuncios in Iraq and Jordan. Father George Jahola from Qaraqosh, priest of the Diocese of Mosul, Kirkuk. Maria Gianniti, a journalist, the envoy of the foreign journalists of the TG1, the main news broadcasting in Italy. And then Mr. Edoardo Tagliani, the coordinator of the AVSI activities in Iraq. And my name is Maria Laura Conte. I am the director of the communication in AVSI. It is a non-profit organization dealing with development projects in the world in 30 different countries. And these countries include Iraq. So let's go straight to the topic, reconstruction and return. From the beginning of the millennium till today, the Christians in Iraq have decreased from 1 million to 350,000 in 2014. They are less than 250,000 today. This is a severe loss for the church and for the entire fabric of this society. It is like a wound, a profound wound, which spreads to the entire world. During this encounter, during this meeting, we would like to understand that the distance is decreasing between ourselves, Baghdad, Qaraqosh. The distance is only a detail. The fates of the people there have to do with us, and with this short video, I will take you to Qaraqosh, because during this encounter we should try and understand what these people in Qaraqosh are experiencing. We will now have a look at the history of Amina. This is our home. There is no better place for us, but it's been almost destroyed by the IS. Only a part of the upper floor has not been burnt down. It's enough. We knew what had happened, but when we came back and we saw the house, we were shocked. They didn't leave anything. For my children, I would like health, safety, and, if God wants, hope. Maria Gianniti, you've been observing the situation and the clashes and the hopes in that area. What can you tell us in order to understand the geopolitical framework of Iraq immediately before, during the IS, and after the IS? Good morning to you all. And thank you for giving us this opportunity to talk about something which is not normally seen in the news. We, as journalists, reach the places where a war is being waged, but then we do not go back to the same areas to tell a little bit about the attempts to reconstruct and to rebuild a life and to reconstruct the houses. This is why it is important today to go back after almost 2 years since the beginning of the attacks, which led to the to reconquering Mosul on the part of the Iraqi governmental forces. So it is important to go back and to talk about what's happening today. What happened in Iraq over the last 4 or 5 years cannot be considered as something different from what happened in Syria. Although these two countries have experienced different conflicts, they have the same fate, namely that of the expansion of the IS. I would like to show you a map, because I want to show you the map number 1. This is how much territory the IS controlled before the offensive, and the territory which the IS is controlling now. So the area, the lighter area, the light brown area, is the area controlled by the IS before the offensive began, and the darker area are the territories which the IS is still controlling today. As you can see, these territories are located most of all in Syria, and this leads us to think that IS actually does not control anything, any territory in Iraq. How was it possible for IS to progress and to move forward? Well, the IS took advantage of 2 different types of chaos. When we talk about Iraq, the IS benefited from the fact that in Iraq there was confusion. The population was composed of Sunnis, and they were profoundly dissatisfied with the government. Saddam Hussein was a Sunnite, and the IS was the propagation of the Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Maybe some of you will know something about al-Zarqawi, and he had brought forward the offensive against the central government of Baghdad, but also against the offensive against the Americans. Then after 2013, when the soldiers from the US withdrew, the IS entered the territory. So based in Syria, where it started in 2013, it soon spread in July until July 2014 to the declaration of the Islamic State from the Al-Nuri Mosque of Mosul. So from the very heart of this large province located in the northern Iraq. And then they kept on taking territories. There was a withdrawal on the part of the Iraqi army. They left everything. They left their vehicles, they left their weapons there, and this means the vehicles and the weapons were available for terrorists. We know that the campaign for reconquering the territories conquered by IS was difficult. It was not easy to coordinate the Iraqi forces with the Kurdish forces which are present in northern Iraq, and it was not easy to have the Americans managing all the situation, although the bombings against the IS led by the US troops started from the beginning, but they were not enough, because the IS, well, I visited some of the towns, not Qaraqosh directly, but I visited Bashika, Martella, and there was a whole network of tunnels, underground tunnels, where the militiamen could displace and live during the bombings. So you can easily imagine what kind of damage for all these small towns and villages, including Qaraqosh, this created. They were occupied by the IS, and the population was forced to flee and to take shelter in the refugee camps. And then there were totally, these towns and these villages were totally destroyed by the IS. The campaign lasted for a long time, and in July 2017, Mosul was declared as reconquered. The towns surrounding Mosul were reconquered. Mosul was more difficult to be reconquered. And then in July 2017, there was this reconquest was possible, but the cost was very, very high. The price was very, very high. The mosque from which al-Baghdadi had announced the birth of the Islamic State, self-proclamating caliph, well, was totally destroyed, as this is the case for most of town. In October 2017, the Kurdish forces, supported by other Arab forces with the US bombings, managed to reconquer Raqqa, which was the capital of the IS in Syria. So there was this withdrawal on the part of the IS. In these days, the offensive is about to begin to win over the IS on the borders between Syria and Iraq. What is the challenge now? The challenge is reconstruction. Why is it important to support reconstruction? Not only because it is necessary to give a home to those who have lost it due to bombings, but also because if you do not give something immediately, another wave of disappointment and anger may arise, and this may lead to conflicts, and so there may be small cells which enlarge, and it could be possible for large cells to organize. We need to provide a message for hope. There is no better place than your own home. Although it's been damaged, although it's been almost destroyed, the desire to go back to your home is stronger than any other thing. I went to Suleimania in the Iraqi Kurdistan last year. I visited the last monastery where Father Paolo Dall'Olio had been. He had left from that monastery towards Raqqa 5 years ago, and then he was kidnapped. In that monastery, there were 250 Christian families from Qaraqosh. They had come into the monastery in 2014, and they had been spending 3 years there. And I talked to some of them. They expressed their fears, but their desire to go back to Qaraqosh was greater. The desire of being able to go back to their village to start the most trivial activity, the school for their kids in their own village. Why is it important to support reconstruction now? Because it is important to recreate communities. Otherwise, the risk is that the fabric of the society could go back to the creation of the sects. And the sects are a fertile ground for the Al-Qaeda and then for the IS. This is very important to be stressed. This, of course, is a very, very thorny and delicate moment for Iraq. As I said, the Iraqi government should try and work a lot on reconciliation. Reconciliation is a fundamental word. As Maria Laura said, the Christian community, which has always been the bridge between the various communities and the various souls of the area in Iraq, in Syria, in the entire Middle East, the Christian community has always been a bridge between the various communities. So this community should feel protected, safeguarded, so that it can go back to its role as a bridge. This is why this moment is particularly delicate, and I think it is more important now to listen to the testimonies from the places involved. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mariana. The floor to Father George. Father George Jahola works in Qaraqosh. He is the priest of the Christian parish in Kurdistan and Mosul. He was born in Qaraqosh in 1954. He graduated in physics. He then joined the seminar, was ordered priest in 1999, came to Italy to study. He then came back to Iraq in 2016. And for the diocese, he is entrusted to take care of the refugees. And then a new order came, that is that of planning the return of refugees back to town. So as soon as the city was freed, Father George organizes a campaign to get information and then plan all the works required to allow them to come back. So basically, he carried out a systematic analysis of the various buildings that needed recovery and reconstruction. So he organized working groups, and then since last September, he has been living in Qaraqosh. Now, Father George, you have the floor. We've heard some information on the geographic, political, and military overview of the area. Now, how is life going on there, based on your experience? How was the life of the Christians immediately before, during, and after their arrival? And for those Christians who have come or are deciding to come, why are they deciding? Have they decided to come? And why are there other people who do not feel the need to come back? Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm really pleased to see that so many people are interested in this topic. But actually, you are in a disadvantaged position, because when I speak freely and spontaneously, I normally speak about more detailed things, and therefore I have some papers with me, and I hope I can communicate to you all the necessary information. I would like to start from 2003 with the end of Saddam's regime. The Iraqi population went through dramatic moments of violence, characterized by the destruction of the society, while so you can have a look at the figures from the slide. While the ruling class in Iraq had its advantages, its benefits, and I'm talking about government members, politicians in general, the population, the people, was in the middle of despair. Christians did not have any situation. So basically, those who was threatened and tortured, there were people who were killed. And for those who were killed, I mean, their family members decided to leave the country. So basically, we had 1 million Christians in 2003. You can see the figures from the slide. And this figure went down to 350,000 before the Islamic State. There was an attack to 6 churches in Baghdad on the 2nd of August 2004. There was a massacre in the Catholic Cathedral in Baghdad on the 30th of October 2010. There we lost 2 young priests and many other people. So Wasim and 5 women, as well as other people who were praying. And then we had attacks to the convoys of university students in Qaraqosh. On those occasions, more than 17 buses, more than 17 convoys were attacked. This happened on the 2nd of May 2010. A number of bishops and priests, as well as lay people, were kidnapped. and also Monsignor Rahau was killed, and Don Aragit Kani were killed. And then we were severely hit, most severely hit, through the occupation of the militias with the self-proclaimed Islamic State, with the aim of dispersing Christians, of spreading Christians, in order to now have a final figure, so that now we have a figure of Christians of which is below 250,000. There was a mass escape from Christian towns. We registered that as well. And the following moment was that of people coming back up to their return to the area. People had to go through very difficult moments. They were sent away from their homes with nothing in their hands. So their return after the defeat of the IS took place in this moment, and the families who stayed in the country were waiting to be liberated patiently, as our friend journalist, Ms. Gianniti, reminded us. Starting from October 2016, Christian towns were liberated, and therefore people, after their liberation, after the liberation of these towns, people went to their homes to check the extent of the damage. In October 2016, my bishop entrusted me with the task to carry out a number of activities for the following stage, mainly consisting in registering and documenting the houses of the Christians. We counted over 7,000 buildings, over 7,000 houses belonging to members of various ethnic groups in town. We created a database to then present these projects to associations, who were willing to carry out the reconstruction. You can see here also from the pictures how the town looked like. You see pictures of the masses. There was a Palm Sunday before 2014. Monsignor Ortega this year actually witnessed this very large amount of people as well. Then I have a short video here. I hope I'll manage to project it, to show it. So this video and in the meantime, while the video is going, I can continue describing. So we started our campaign for the reconstruction of the houses. This in May 2017. First, the buildings, the houses had to be, so to say, assured, and then employment, and then anything that's necessary to live. It was not, of course, difficult to have this project start. We had to face a number of obstacles also on the part of those who opposed the return of the Christians. Everybody agrees on Christians coming back, because many people, however, fear that the area is not safe. They fear that the IS will come back again. But we believed in this project of ours, and that's why we worked further. So when talking about the Christians who are coming back, we can say that in about a year time, over the last 12 months, about 24,000 inhabitants have come back. And now we've reached a figure of about 26,000. We followed a specific approach, a specific strategy. Families have children. Children have to start school. And therefore, we were able to accommodate these people in alternative housing solutions. Maybe there are other pictures that we can show. These are pictures of the volunteering committees. So what you see here are pictures of how we started our work to, in a way, count the available buildings and made some kind of a census of the city. So we sort of took a snapshot of how the IS left the city. And when we took these pictures, still we did not have in mind clearly how we wanted the reconstruction to take place and how reconstruction was to be carried out. So far, the aid we received come from Christian foundations, so maybe from the Christians themselves who are close to us, who support us. Here you find also some data sheets from the database containing the data that I was mentioning before. I cannot but mention AVSI. He's always been present ever since the beginning. He is now in Kurdistan. And he supported us with the works on the kindergarten in Erbil, and then in October last, he also supported the work for the reconstruction of the kindergarten run by the Dominican sisters in Qaraqosh. So far, no European country has, in a way, offered its help to reconstruct the town. So basically, we've been supported by the Christians in Europe and in the world who've done fundraising, who've collected money through available channels. There's one important thing to point out, which refers to spiritual support. That's also equally important. In other words, the prayer that we as persecuted Christians perceive and feel. We feel that a lot of prayers have been made for us, and I am particularly would like to mention the Nazareth Committee, which is basically doing a lot of work. We are also within that committee. We are praying within that committee, and we are praying for those who pray for us. Last but not least, let's talk about responsibilities or blames. Actually, it is not our intention to put the blame on anyone of our situation. Reconstruction does not only mean that we need money. Actually, our population has been halved. Families are separated. A part of the family is in Jordanland, another part is in Iraq or in Southern Europe. So basically, our social fabric has been completely destroyed. We, as members of the church, are working to help those who have decided to leave the country to come back to their country. This is a major damage, the major damage that the Christians were exposed to. So the IS was growing all over the world. Nobody can dare say that they were ignoring the rise of the IS. Qaraqosh and Baghdad will probably remain the last stronghold of Christianity in the country. And so I would like to appeal those who, vis-a-vis those who, before the time comes when people say this is the place where Christians lived in the past. So to this end, in order for this not to take place, we need the essential support on the part of the government to protect us there and not elsewhere, but directly there. So going back to the topic of the meeting, the forces that move history are the same that make man happy. Well, this is probably a history. This is a history that is only 39 years old. Through these editions of the meeting has made lots of individuals and lots of communities happy in order to grow and be happy from a human point of view, and also to give hope, as you have done today, as the organizer of the meeting has today, by inviting someone from a country ravaged by war, with a population that is now only half the size it used to be before, and in order to have our voice heard the world over. So this is hope. We get hope from the Rimini meeting, and within this hope we also have happiness. Thank you very much.
One year ago, when with AVSI we went to Qaraqosh, leaving from Erbil, and so following the same pathway of the Christians fleeing from Qaraqosh to take shelter in Kurdistan, and we've had a chance on that occasion to realize with our staff members that it was the willingness to restart living was stronger than the terror to find their own houses burnt down or bombed down, razed to the ground. The willingness to go back was stronger, and they were willing to fill the trucks with everything that was possible to take back to their homes. With Mr. Tagliani, we will now focus on this humanitarian need for the present, and we would like to recognize the strength you've had a chance to see in the initial video, and the desire to start again. So this is for Restart. Edoardo Tagliani has 2 children. He's a journalist. 20 years ago, he decided to have a brief experience abroad in a humanitarian sphere in Congo with AVSI. The impact with that reality shocked him, and he started to work in the cooperation field in Pakistan, Burundi, Chad, and for AVSI, he is the head of the programs for the Middle East. So, Edoardo, what is the extent, what is the dimension of the humanitarian needs now? I would like to remind you that in Qaraqosh, there is one project that many of you have probably supported, the project of the 10-day campaign to rebuild a kindergarten in Qaraqosh. Tell us a little bit about this, about your work. There are still many needs. Thank you for inviting me, first of all. There are many, many needs, many requirements. As Father George said, we have material requirements. We need to rebuild the houses. People have lost their jobs, so we need to rebuild a social economic fabric. We have both material and primary basic necessities in that area. And I would like to explain to you this need, starting from reconstruction and return. I would like to try and show you a side of the war, of the return, of the reconstruction, which is behind the scene. Most of all, we're accustomed to seeing the war being waged on TV. And if you are distant from the war, you tend to think that the war means the bombs, the Kalashnikov shooting, the people dying, the houses destroyed. Well, of course, war is all this. But war is also a very cheaty kind of beast. The war cheats you because the greatest damage are not the visible damages. The real war begins in many cases when the bombs stop. War can be silent, and it is often silent. And I would like to say that, as Father George mentioned, in August 2014, when Daesh, the IS, took the Qaraqosh, the town of Qaraqosh, we were already in Erbil, where the inhabitants of Qaraqosh looked for shelter, because they considered Erbil as a safe town. And they were right, because Erbil was never conquered by the IS. We were there. We've done several things, and we focus on one. We created a temporary kindergarten for the children of Qaraqosh in Osal City, a neighborhood. And so there was a kindergarten of Osal City. Then finally, after very difficult years, Qaraqosh was finally liberated. So AVSI had accompanied those children and those families during their escape, and while they were staying in the place where they found shelter, AVSI decided to go back to their homes with those people, and AVSI decided to rebuild the kindergarten in Qaraqosh. There were about 250 children. Now we are carrying out some works for renewal and reconstruction. We now hosting 453 children, because the kindergarten was immediately operational. The courses started in October last year, and this year we're going to start with the second year of courses. So to tell you a little bit more about this war behind the scenes, I would like to start from two very short videos. If it's possible to show the videos, I would like to show you the first video. Please pay attention to what you see in the video. We're going to see a teacher and a kid. Try and memorize the few words they say. My name is Armin Eshual Jamil. I come from Qaraqosh. I'm married and I have 2 kids. I took a degree in physical training college, and now I work as a teacher. When I work with the kids, I feel I'm contributing to a great change, helping them to growth, socialize. I contribute to their education and to develop their personalities. The kindergarten is the basis, the beginning of the entire education pathway. The way of teaching to children in the kindergarten is different from the way of teaching them at home. Education is fundamental for the development of the personality of a kid. To me, it is important to teach children not only alphabet, the letters, the shapes, and the colors. It is more important to teach them the basis of life, how to sit, how to walk, how to behave, and how to interact with the other people. Thank you. Is it possible to show the second video? It is shorter. I would like I would like my name is Adrian. I am 5 years old. And before I came to Qaraqosh, I lived in Ankawa. I come to the kindergarten to play, learn, to color. I have two friends, Marvin and Yusuf, and we have fun together here in the kindergarten. When I grow up, I would like to become an astronaut, and so I will study sciences. How do you say? Sciences of space. Space sciences. I always forget that. So let's go back to the previous concept. Let's see whether with these two short videos I managed to explain to you one of the many things carried out by AVSI. One of the many things one of the main consequences of war, when the noise, the sound of war becomes a silence. The teacher of the kindergarten says, this is her first sentence, I come from Qaraqosh. And finally, I've come back to Qaraqosh, and I am a teacher at the kindergarten. Adrian instead says, I am 5 years old, and before I came to Qaraqosh, I lived in Erbil. Think about why they said two different things. He was born while his parents were escaping, fleeing from war. Those of us who walk in those areas, like myself and the other two men sitting here, I'm talking about Qaraqosh, but I'm referring to the entire Syrian crisis. If you visit the refugee camps in Lebanon, in Jordan, or in the hinterland refugee camps in Syria, you walk through entire generations of children who do not know anything else but their condition as displaced people. They have no memories of what home is. The teacher comes back. The child does not come back. The child goes to Qaraqosh. This is what he says. Let's make a calculation, a rough calculation. Do you have, what are your oldest remembrances, memories? Let's say they date back to 4 years, when you were 4. The Qaraqosh children were escaping for 3 or 4 years. So 4 and 4 makes 8. It means that all the kids aged less than 8 years don't even have an image, a picture, a mental picture of what their home was. Other Syrian refugees have been escaping or have been refugees for over 11 or 12 years. So we're talking about teens. They are 12 years old and they do not know what house means. When they go back, it will be like being displaced in your own village. So the social fabric needs to be rebuilt in this sense, because a war is creating generations of people without roots. That kid, when he was fleeing the war in Erbil, maybe he lived under a tent with some friends. Then when he got back to Qaraqosh, he probably lost some of his friends. Maybe they've also come back, but they live in a different neighborhood, and so he no longer sees them. So it's a totally new life for him. The teacher gets back to Qaraqosh, and he goes for the first time to Qaraqosh. So two different points of view. Rebuilding the houses, rebuilding the kindergartens is very difficult, but this is a more and even a harder work. This is one of the silent damages brought about by war. I would like to close this contribution by saying that, as Abuna George said, there is a very big social and economic component to be rebuilt. So you rebuild a house, but if you don't have any job, you cannot live in a town like Qaraqosh. If you have no employment, no jobs. We will continue to support the kindergarten this year and the next year as well. But in a few days in September, we're going to start another project. The first stage will last for 2 years, and we will support the reopening of over 100 agricultural businesses and businesses, small businesses, for family-led animal breeding. This was the first activity carried out in Qaraqosh before the IS. If you do not support economic activity, it is not possible for life to re-begin in these places. The social fabric is very, very hard to be rebuilt, and hopefully we as AVSI will have a chance to play an important role. Thank you very much.
So going back to the story of Christians in the Middle East, as we said at the beginning, Qaraqosh is the example of the very delicate situation the Christians live in the Middle East. Monsignor Ortega has recently pronounced the following words on the occasion of a meeting with the Middle East Christians. The faith expressed by these Christians for us is a gift by God. It is a yes to God that costed everything to them. In 2014, with the Islamic State, they were forced to choose between converting themselves, paying a fee, or going away in order to flee the massacre. They left everything. These are the words of Mr. Ortega, in order not to abjure their faith. Their testimony for us is a real gift for us. How and why? Good morning, everyone. I am really very happy of participating in this meeting and to show you, to talk about the situation of Christians in Iraq. They are splendid Christians to me. And to me, it is a really great joy to be there. I've also had the pleasure to meet the Pope last month, and I was also telling the Pope that the fact that I am a Nuncio, an Apostolic Nuncio in Iraq, is a real privilege. It is a privilege to be close to these Christians and to have the chance to do something for them and for the country. I am really very happy and hopeful about the fact that they are now coming back to their villages. Their return has started and reconstruction has started. A couple of words from the message of the Pope to the meeting came to my mind, actually. His resurrection, the resurrection of Jesus Christ, is nothing of the past. It has a strength of life that penetrated the world, where apparently everything is dead. But actually everywhere the blossoms of resurrections are appearing again. This is unparalleled strength. In the midst of obscurity, you always find something blooming, something new blooming again. That's the strength of resurrection. That's a strength which is stronger than anything else. And the Iraqi Christians have testified to that. Their testimony is a treasure, because it reminds us all of the value of faith. They remind us all of what is dearest to us, that is to say, Jesus Christ himself. They said yes to Jesus Christ and they lost everything for that. They had this option, either converting or paying or leaving. Of course, I know of nobody who converted. As far as I know, nobody converted. Even, they didn't even pretend to convert, not even to maintain their job or their house. All of them fled the country. All of them fled their house. And when I went to the refugee camps and conversed with them, I was always told by all of them that they were deprived, they had been deprived of everything, but not of their faith. This is a true testimony. This is a gift, a treasure. And it helped us all in Italy, in Spain, in Europe in general. I know a lot of people who were, in a way, stimulated by this example of the Iraqi Christians. They were stimulated to live their faith more strongly. And it is also equally nice to see that, I mean, these people went through moments of difficulties. They were living in very difficult situations in refugee camps, in the wilderness, but then they managed to come back. And this led to increased solidarity on the part of the church. A lot of aid has come, tangible aid, to maintain these people and now also to help them come back to their villages. Their testimony is an asset, a true resource for the church. Some of them even gave their lives. And now it's very nice to see that some of these martyrs that Father George has reminded us. Now we also have canonization and beatification cases. For example, the believers of the Syro-Catholic cathedral. For the people, they are already saints, they are already martyrs, and the church itself will also acknowledge this. So these people are moved by the faith and they want to come back. They are moved by their sense of belonging to their land, but it is especially their faith that supports them. Their faith supported them when they were out of their villages. It was really touching to see in the refugee camps that actually the very center of the refugee camp was a chapel. In other words, a tent, a shelter turned into a chapel. And there was the shelter of hope. And in that shelter, they built a prefab building that accommodated the church. And now they're coming back to their houses, and it's very nice, really beautiful to see that some of the churches in the refugee camps, supported by AVSI, that these shelters, these churches were moved. They were prefab churches, as I said before, and they have been brought back to a neighborhood in Qaraqosh. So these shelters, these prefab churches continue being the very center in the lives of people. The role played by religious people and priests is also worth mentioning. They were the very first ones to have come back. Also, Father Caldeo reminded everybody that you have to be the first. If it is not priests or nuns who come back, well, then nobody will follow. And it was beautiful to see that they were indeed the very first to come back. And soon after, schools were reopened, kindergartens were reopened, and normal life started. And that's a real blessing for everybody. So the faith supported them all. Also, the ability to forgive the others is a great experience. Some people have come back, thank God. But and then these people have now managed to forgive those who had sent them away. You probably remember the video of this medium, this young girl from Qaraqosh. I even had the privilege to meet this young girl when I went to Ankawa in Erbil. She was there with other children, and I asked the nun to greet her. I told her that actually she had a lot of friends in Italy and Spain, and I was pleased that I had the chance to get to know her. And soon after, I thought that not only this young girl was there, not only Miriam was there, there were about 450 young boys and girls were there. Many of them are certainly like Miriam, and that's a whole people, that's a whole population capable of forgiving. And now it's really touching to see that you have Caritas Iraq helping everybody. As we're talking about the majority, as the majority of the population is made up of Muslims, the Caritas also helps Muslims. And Caritas Iraq helps them. It brings them food and things. Some of them are the ones who, in a way, had kicked them out of their place in the first place. Now they are in need, and it is the Christians who bring them food. This is unbelievable. That's really unbelievable. That's a valuable, precious testimony. So this is really a great resource, and something new has started. The mission of the church, this is something that I always like to tell religious people, is to give hope, to support the hope of these Christians, a hope that stems from faith. Hope cannot be based on simply changing the circumstances. Of course, I do hope that circumstances will change. I do hope that these people can come back in safety and in stability. But actually, the real hope is the presence of God and the certainty given by God. So with the words of the Father in the meeting, the true belief that Christ is the beginning of the new world. These Christians have taught us the value of faith. When I asked some of them what they expect from the Christians in the West, maybe I was expecting that their answers would be that they send us money. And actually, their reply was conversely quite the opposite. They said, we expect from them that they live up their faith. That they live their faith. I think that's the biggest way to help. We can help by praying. This was already reminded us by previous contributions. Praying is important. We can help tangibly with lots of help. Also, some governments helped, Hungary helped, but actually almost all depends on the church. So this aid is very important, and the great support is actually to support to support God by saying yes to God. Only in this way can we support them. It's important to support them because the presence of Christians in this place is of key importance. We've recently seen that there has been a drastic reduction, a severe reduction in the number of Christians in these countries, and that's a pity. A Middle East without the Christians is no Middle East. There would be a severe loss, not only for the church, but for society as a whole. The Christians has a fundamental mission to accomplish. They serve as bridges. They bring peace and reconciliation. They bring development. If there is this wish that characterizes the Arab Springs to bring about more justice, more respect for the people, well, these are values that the Christians have in their tradition. And it would be really very sad that the Christians are no longer there. That is why we need to support them. We need to support them with all of our strength. The Pope has this thinks that this topic is very important. This topic is very dear to him. He's carried out a number of initiatives to support the Christians in the Middle East. Among the latest initiatives, one concerned the fact that he nominated the Patriarch of the Chaldea Church a cardinal. And that's a gesture that testifies his vicinity, his proximity to the church there. On the 7th of July, he convened a meeting in Bari for all patriarchs and some bishops. And he held a brilliant, fantastic speech. That's a great support because it is really very important for Christians to be there. They have a mission. They have a mission to accomplish. When I speak to them to encourage them to stay, there's one thing that comes to mind. And I always like to tell them that, they have a mission. They have a fundamental mission to accomplish. They testify to Christ's presence there in the Holy Land. So everything we do to support them is important. So that is why I would like to kindly invite you to continue supporting them by praying, by helping them, and by saying yes to the Lord every day. Thank you very much from the bottom of my heart.
So let's go back to your experience, Maria. As I said at the beginning, these opportunities are like tools to reduce distances, and knowledge is fundamental in this respect. You work in the media, you know the mechanisms of information. How is it possible for us to remain really aware of and informed about what happens in these places where we need to face the risk of reading something which is a result of propaganda? How can we remain? How can we be kept informed? Well, I believe that this kind of initiatives are very useful. So bringing testimonies from people living in those areas, and they help us understand really what's happening in these places right now. We journalists are always ready to go to many places where a war has been waged, but we're not as ready and as willing to tell and to testify to what is happening after the war has ended. So for the general public, it is important to resort to the direct source of the news. They are our source of information, and because in this way you can understand what is being done in those places. Only if you go to the place, to the proper place, and I'm talking about the people in charge of information. Only if you go to the place, you have the chance to really talk about what's happening. So it is important to have people going to the places and telling things firsthand, because they are really witnessing them with their own eyes. If this is not possible, we should work so that the people living in those areas come here to talk about what's happening. As Padre George said, well, Qaraqosh has remained a bastion, the stronghold for the Christians in that area. It is an important and sad news, at this piece of news at the same time, if you consider the figures and the number of Christians living in that area before the IS came. This is an important figure for knowledge. And this is a piece of information that you can receive only from the people living in those areas. As for the journalists, we should insist with the persons in charge of our work to keep sending us to those places. And the important thing is not simply resorting to websites or to the general mass media to get information, but you should always resort to the people living there. There's another small detail. For us as journalists, it has become very, very difficult to talk about conflicts, because it's become a real dangerous kind of activity. I have a colleague who said when there was a war in Lebanon, a conflict in Lebanon, it was easy for us because we could go to all the places in Lebanon. But now, after the attacks of the 11th of September, after the war in Iraq, everything has become more complicated because journalists do not have access to all the areas. There are areas of these countries where journalists cannot go. And so we can only take the testimonies from the people living there. So information has also become more fragmented and more difficult. So let's try and draw information from all the people living in the specific areas. They are the only ones who can tell us really what's happening. Edoardo, I listed the countries you visited and you worked in, so you're used to work in places where destruction has left debris and where everything needs to be reconstructed. After 20 years of activity, what is your greatest defense against skepticism? We are confronted with debris, with the ruins of villages. And as for the kindergarten, you can save the lives of 500 kids, but 20,000 kids have not returned home. What is it? What is your strength so that you do not say, I give up? Well, you are giving me a sort of an assist for my conclusion. One of the 5 points for the method of AVSI is the person at the core of our activity. So the central position, the core position of the individuals and how people meet. If you think about it, you question the interpretation of the world and what happens in the world. But carrying out such a weird kind of activity as ours, you have the privilege, the enormous privilege of meeting people. And if you focus on their charisma, on their determination and their willingness, well, the good sense will suggest you to stay quiet, to listen to them, and to learn, if possible, so that when you go back home in the evening, you should also feel a little bit ashamed because you are not suitable, you're not fit for the tasks. One of those people is sitting on my left. And this person is Abuna George. In those areas, he's doing something which is almost a miracle. Of course, many people are working in the reconstruction of Qaraqosh, of course. But there is a driving engine, a driving force behind this reconstruction. We're not talking about rebuilding a city. We need to rebuild the bastion of Christianity in the Nineveh plain. Well, I am almost sure, I may be wrong, but I'm almost sure that things would have been different if there hadn't been a man such as Father George in that place in that moment. This leads me not to feel discouraged, because I'm lucky enough to meet several people like that, several men like that, like him, with different religious beliefs, but with the capability to lead other men and to be always ready to face the worst situations with a message of hope. Before I leave the floor to Maria Laura, please, another applause for Father George. When you walk through the streets of Qaraqosh, or recently we went to Aleppo as well, and when you walk through the debris left by the bombings, and landscape becomes gray because destruction even erases colors. Well, the question is, you see this external destruction, but you don't see the destruction of the soul, but it is not less severe. So what we heard during the occupation was that the Christians fleeing received messages from those who had occupied their homes with a picture of the person occupying the houses sitting on the couches. So one of the wounds is that of the destruction of the mutual confidence and mutual trust between the neighbors, which was destroyed by the war. So how can you, how are you rebuilding this mutual confidence, this mutual trust? Well, this is it's not easy to say thank you. It's sort of a shock. You need time. Some time is needed to absorb this shock and then to respond in a more Christian way, and then in a more human way. In those lands, talking about human is a little bit of an exaggeration, because it is not easy to find people willing to welcome other men. They are being crushed by violence, by policy. But our role as representatives of the Church is certainly that of reconciling the various parties, and most of all those who have attacked us. You cannot live in a ghetto, in a closed ghetto, because we are surrounded, we are circled by other populations who may have, maybe in favor of the IS, and they come to carry out businesses in our towns. And this role is a strong role which has to be played by the Church. And the Church's role is that of keeping peace, of keeping the situation calm, and to provide a Christian response to these aggressive actions. And those who understand on the other side, well, will not remain indifferent. The first Christian community, well, they admire the martyrs because they could not understand which kind of strength the martyrs had to respond with good intentions and with the good to those who oppress them or attack them. And today we have the same role and the same role to play. We should not simply be good. We should provide a testimony in the place where we're living. And as I said, there will always be somebody thinking about this. There will always be something thinking about our behavior, and that will conclude that the Christians are the right image of the Lord, forgiving. And maybe this is a way to embrace and to adhere to Christianity. In this case, we will have achieved in convincing. We will have managed convincing our enemies, so to say.
Monsignor Ortega, I would like to kindly ask you one thing. You said that Christians ask for prayers. I mean, the Christians you're surrounded with in the Middle East ask for prayers. So when you are praying for the Christians, what are you asking for them, and what do you suggest that we ask for them? So what is your precise questions? What do they need? What do you ask for them? Well, in terms of praying, I am asking that they live for their faith, that they live their vocation. Two aspects are, in my opinion, particularly important. In the Holy See, there has been a growing concern because of the reduction of Christians all over the world. There was, and as a matter of fact, a meeting for the Middle East was organized. A synod was organized for the Middle East. and the topic was the church in the Middle East, communion and testimony. I think that these are the two fundamental things for the Christians there. So first thing, they should live communion. This is not to be taken for granted, because that's at the very heart of the life of the church. Communion is at the very heart of the life of the church. So it is really beautiful that we have this committee where Father George is involved, and that initiative involves the Syro-Catholic Church, and the Chaldean Church is involved, as well as the Syrian Church is involved. So this committee tries to promote collaboration. So very mysteriously, persecutions have brought the Christians together. The Pope talked about the ecumenism of the blood, of martyrdom. Actually, the thing to focus is that one is a Christian. So in my prayers, this is fundamental. Communion is fundamental, because that's a fundamental presence. In other words, what did Jesus ask in his prayers, in his priestly prayers? Basically, he asked for communion. There is a huge diversity. There is huge wealth in the Middle East. Armenian Church. There's the Orthodox. But actually, this is not to be taken for granted. So there's, and then also testimony. So the Christians should be the good testimony and the good expression of the Lord in order to testify to his presence for all Christians. So with these final words, I would like to close here. I would like to thank you very much. I would like to kindly invite you to pass by and visit the AVSI stand so that you can have a look at the map that we exhibited. That's basically the world upside down. Our idea is that we are promoting an alternative geography in which distances change. We might find ourselves in Qaraqosh today. We might see the and we're called upon to carry out twofold work. First of all, to continue knowing, to continue fostering knowledge. And then another moment, which is that of acting, tangibly supporting. There's lots of ways through which you can do it. The most personal one, the most daily one, in line with this proposal of an alternative geography, is that of having a distance support. So a small distance support that brings about a change far away from us and favors support in general and good neighborhood that has a strong persistence. So the AVSI site has a lot of information on this. You're kindly invited to come and see our projects. Thank you very much.